Discover the amazing moment when a poor black janitor's unexpected kiss saved a billionaire's life. Arthur lived in a world where the polished floors of the corporate skyscraper gleamed like a facade masking the grimy reality of inequity. At 45, scrubbing these marble tiles every night felt like being trapped in a never-ending cycle of service. A service he performed with pride, yet harbored dreams far grander than mops and buckets. The whispers of an engineering degree tugged at him like a half-forgotten song. His heart swelled with hope for his 2 children while drowning in worries about their fragile future. Each stroke of his mop pulled him deeper into a dance with a haunting thought. Could he really escape this? As the vacuum hummed down the hall, Arthur's thoughts splintered. The news of budget cuts had been like a double-edged sword, combining his drive for a better life with a gnawing fear. What did cutting corners really mean if it jeopardized the workers like him? The whispered conversation drifting from the executive offices made his stomach churn. It was the same old story: profits over people, ambition eclipsing humanity. A sense of betrayal gripped him. The safety of those around him was at stake, yet who would listen to a janitor? Before he could center his racing mind, chaos erupted like a sudden storm. The elevator system, a perfect metaphor for the heartless company, malfunctioned. Screams echoed as the machinery wheezed and screeched beneath stress. Arthur's gut twisted at the realization one of his co-workers was trapped inside. It was a moment that could define his character. Step forward and risk everything, or retreat into silence, maintaining the fragile peace of invisibility. The choice constricted in his chest. Before we continue, I need to tell you about something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to the system, and many people are losing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, click the bell and mark all notifications so you don't miss the next videos. And if you can leave a like, it really helps with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now let's continue. Taking a breath, he bolted toward the frenetic scene. His heart raced as the steel doors were pried open, revealing a desperate face inside. Without hesitation, Arthur activated instincts buried deep, fueled by a primal urge to protect. In that moment of acute clarity, he saw not just his co-worker, but every worker who understood the price of negligence. Was his life intertwined with theirs, worth risking? But triumph quickly soured as the story spun out of control. Despite his heroism, the CEO, Charles Whitaker, brought nothing but condescension. As Arthur stood there, breathless and shaken, his nobility was received with a look of disdain, an unreadable equation of class disparity written across a polished exterior. Anger boiled, but so did something unexpected.
An urge to transcend their societal divides. He saw a man who had lost touch with humility, but not empathy. Arthur leaned in, planting a kiss on Charles's cheek, a challenge, awakening a shimmering possibility. Yet with that act came an awareness. Could change ever sprout from such rigid ground? Would either man ever conquer the prejudices intertwined with their fates? The question lingered in the charged air, leaving both men wrestling with their choices, forever bound by the moment that split their worlds in two. What lay ahead was uncertain, yet the stakes had never felt so high. The shimmer of the polished floors seemed to mock Arthur as he resumed his nighttime routine, each swipe of the mop a reminder of the barriers he faced. The kiss had hung in the air, a silent challenge that echoed in his mind. It was a moment that should have fortified him, yet instead birthed a deeper chasm. How could he transcend the disdain? Would Charles Whitaker become an ally or remain an emblem of corporate ignorance? Days passed, and Arthur felt the weight of uncertainty. His work remained unchanged, but now he felt like an outsider in a realm he had always inhabited, invisible yet necessary. The aftermath of the elevator incident brought fleeting attention to the employees, making him suddenly aware of how easily the narrative could shift. Discussions about safety emerged, but they often cascaded down a slippery slope of insincerity. Management promised reforms that fizzled quickly, leaving the workforce with nothing more than hollow reassurances. That afternoon, while cleaning in a rarely visited office, Arthur stumbled across a pile of discarded documents. Something compelled him to look closer. Reports on potential layoffs, names, numbers, and strategies danced before his eyes. His heart raced as he pieced together pathways to preserve not just his job, but the livelihoods of others, risking being swept away by the corporate tide. He was standing at the precipice of an opportunity to shift the narrative, but the weight of the secret was heavy. Confronted with a choice once more, Arthur questioned whether revealing the information could stir the consciousness of those in power. Would his voice matter? It was terrifying, yet thrilling. He decided to consult Eliza, a co-worker who had spent years maneuvering the corporate jungle, navigating it with a mix of respect and wary skepticism. She could dissect the documents, and perhaps, collectively, they could plan a counterattack, not just for themselves, but for every worker sunk beneath the waves of corporate negligence. When he approached Eliza, he sensed her initial reluctance. Years of surviving in a precarious job environment had instilled in her a cautiousness that pushed against the walls of hope. "Arthur, you know what happens when you challenge them. They don't want to be held accountable. They prefer silence over change," she warned, concern etched into her features. Yet sharing his insight fueled a spark within Arthur. "But what if we can make them listen? We have the right to demand."
"More than just keep working," he retorted. The intensity of the moment hung around them, conjuring a vision of what could be if they combined their strengths. Perhaps they could rattle the complacency that draped the offices in the building. Emboldened by a flicker of a plan, Arthur knew he couldn't dwell solely within the shadows of janitorial duties. It was time to step deeper into the conversation, a call to action disguised as boldness rather than trepidation. But even as he embraced this new purpose, doubt loomed. How could a janitor, just a ghost in the eyes of the board, leverage this information for meaningful change? What allies resided within those marble confines? In their shadows, were there others who sought justice, perhaps hesitant as he had been? A single thought echoed louder than all his fears. The old narrative could shift. He could become a catalyst. The decisions ahead would test every facet of his resolve. The moment of truth approached, but as he prepared for confrontation with the company's oblivious leadership, a realization clanged in his mind. Would he truly be ready to face the immense power of indifference head-on? Would he find the courage to not only demand answers, but also define what he deemed success? Arthur's heart pounded as the hour of reckoning loomed closer, ready to embrace the chaos and revelations ahead. Arthur paced the dimly lit corridor, his mind racing. The prospect of confronting the higher-ups was both exhilarating and terrifying. Each step echoed his growing resolve. He was no longer just a janitor. He was a vessel for change, a potential voice for those silenced by corporate machinations. As he reached the glass-paneled office of Charles Whitaker, he hesitated. The shiny exterior mirrored his inner conflict. Did he have enough backing? Would his initiative hold water against a tide of indifference? The documents in his pocket felt like a weight. The knowledge could either illuminate or destroy his efforts. But in the end, it was the fear of inaction that propelled him forward. "Arthur!" Charles' voice pulled him from his bubbling thoughts. The billionaire was reviewing some papers, a frown anchored on his brow, entirely belied by his usual robust demeanor. "What brings you here tonight?" Taking a deep breath, Arthur stepped into the lion's den, reclaiming space he usually regarded from the periphery. "I need to talk to you about the documents I found," he said. His voice was steadier than he felt. He locked eyes with Charles, searching for any flicker of acknowledgement that his words could resonate. Charles leaned back, folding his arms. "You mean the layoff reports?
That's not really your area, is it? No, sir, but it concerns me and the rest of the staff. With everything happening, I believe it's important we discuss this. He fought against the swell of anxiety that tugged at the edges of his composure. In the silence that enveloped them, Arthur felt the weight of the hierarchy pressing down on him. Doubts flickered through his mind. Was he about to overstep? But the urgency clamored louder. People are worried, they're scared, and they deserve transparency. We all do. Charles shifted, a small crack forming in his veneer of indifference. Look, I appreciate that you care about your colleagues, but talking about this is complicated. His words were a barrier, but Arthur sensed a sliver of openness behind them. It's just paperwork to you, but for us, it's lives, futures, jobs at stake. The passion in Arthur's voice rose, bolstered by the confidence that was slowly brewing within him. I never wanted to, Charles began, but Arthur cut him off. Then let's change that. You have the power to do something. You could be an ally, a supporter of your own employees. Help us shift the narrative. The tension in the room hung thick, an electric pull between their opposing worlds. Arthur could almost feel the gears in Charles's mind clicking, considering, weighing the potential impact of such a stance. Just as Charles was about to respond, the door swung open. Eliza entered, her expression a mix of surprise and caution. Am I interrupting? No, just discussing some plans, Arthur quickly said, clutching the hope that this unexpected ally could tip the balance. Eliza looked from Arthur to Charles, an understanding dawning. Arthur's right. Transparency can ignite trust. Considering the current conversations around safety and layoffs, maybe this is the moment to lead from the front. Charles shifted uneasily, the weight of their words storming over him. I'll consider it, he finally said, his voice barely above a whisper, but Arthur heard the slight tremor of resolve. As he walked out with Eliza, a rush of adrenaline propelled them forward. The possibility of change thrummed through the air. For the first time, Arthur felt himself moving beyond the shadows, the past and its burdens momentarily forgotten. But doubt lingered. The road ahead would not be simple. They had just nudged a monumental entity, and he wondered, would their small victories change the trajectory of the narrative, or was it merely a brief flicker of hope in a darkened landscape? The challenge remained, and as he tucked the documents back into his pocket, Arthur understood this was merely the beginning. The time had come for a deeper confrontation. Would he maintain the courage to push onward, or would the weight of unyielding corporate power drag him back into silence? Arthur stepped into the dimly lit break room, his heart still racing from the encounter with Charles and Eliza. The air felt thick with unease, as if the walls were looming, conspiring against his newfound resolve. The chaos of emotions swirled within him, threading determination with apprehension. He poured himself a cup of coffee, the warmth of the mug grounding him against the wave of uncertainty. He needed clarity. He had taken the first step towards change, but it was merely the tip of the iceberg. Would this newfound courage hold as the next challenge loomed on the horizon? Arthur leaned against the counter, his mind churning, dissecting every possible consequence of the meeting. The documents felt heavier now, no longer just papers, but symbols of potential upheaval. He glanced at the clock ticking in the corner, counting down the seconds to the incoming storm. It wouldn't just be a corporate affair. It would ripple through personal relationships and ethics. Could he bear the fallout of exposing the core truths hidden beneath layers of bureaucracy? He mulled over Eliza's unexpected alliance. Her support was a fragile thread, an ally that might just barge into a battlefield unqualified for the heavy artillery of corporate politics. He wrestled with the possibility of bringing her into the conversation more directly. Would she now also shoulder the weight of accountability? As he took a sip of the coffee's bitter warmth, he saw Mira, one of the team members he had once shared coffee breaks with. The light in her eyes seemed dimmer these days, the weight of potential layoffs bearing down on her shoulders. She had been at the company for years, a devoted worker who deserved more than corporate indifference. "Hey, Arthur," Mira called out, jolting him from his thoughts, her voice tinged with the weariness he had grown accustomed to among his coworkers. "Thought I saw you with Charles earlier. Everything okay?" Her question cut straight through him, a quiet acknowledgement of the apprehensions shared amongst the staff. He hesitated, eyes darting away, in search of the right words, the right tone. But then a realization washed over him. This was precisely the moment for clarity. "Mira," he began, his voice stronger than he intended, "I spoke to Charles about the layoffs. It's important that he sees how the staff feels. We deserve transparency, not just some email." He couldn't help but catch the flicker of hope in her expression, followed by confusion. "You really think talking to him will make a difference?" she asked, skepticism grounding her candor. "I have to believe it will. Things need to change. We have to make them change." The affirmation formed a shield against the rising doubt. "Count me in then," she said, a delicate smile breaking through her guardedness. "If we're going to challenge this, we might as well do it together." Arthur felt a surge of determination as he nodded, recognizing the gravitas of their union. Allies weren't just on paper, they were built in shared resolve. The breakthrough felt extraordinary. Every glass ceiling they would need to shatter was suddenly tinged with possibility. That shared moment became the catalyst Arthur hadn't known he was seeking. It galvanized him, drawing into focus a strategy rather than a mere confrontation. He could cultivate a coalition, start mobilizing more voices, knowing that the whispers he had been hearing now had a chorus. But even as the foundation of support began to form, his thoughts spiraled. Awareness settled in. Standing against corporate authority would surely attract scrutiny. Charles could dismiss him entirely, or worse, retaliate. The stakes now rose in tandem with his ambition. Plunging ahead as a mere janitor was a far cry from being equipped to push through systemic barriers. While newfound resolve swelled in him, the reality was undeniably daunting. Arthur had nudged a giant, and the repercussions could ripple far beyond what he anticipated. The door swung open yet again. The air felt electric as he realized more allies were surfacing, emboldened by what he had dared to do. But the horizon was darkening too. What kind of backlash would come if he stepped too deeply into this turbulent sea? As he gathered the group by the coffee machine, Arthur prepared to share his thoughts. The next wave of confrontation was about to unfold. Would he have what it takes to embody this coalition amidst the corporate storm about to brew? Arthur's heart raced as he faced his small circle of allies. The break room, once a haven for casual banter and mundane coffee breaks, now hummed with tension and purpose. He shifted his coffee cup from hand to hand, feeling the heat seep into his palms as if it could somehow absorb his apprehension. "Listen up, everyone," he started, steadying his voice against the mounting gravity of the moment. Mira stood to his right, her expression mixed with fear and curiosity. Two other colleagues, Ben and Leela, leaned in, eager yet wary. Arthur glanced from face to face, sensing a shared commitment that propelled him forward. "We can't just wait for word from above. We need to show them how serious we are about the layoffs and transparency. We deserve an explanation, and we deserve to be heard." He fought against the urge to glance at the door, as if expecting Charles to burst in and silence them. "Yeah, but what can we really do?" Leela interjected, the doubt seeping into her tone. "We're just us. They hold all the power." That line struck Arthur squarely in the chest, a reminder of his own frailty. Yet it steeled his resolve. It's true they have the power, but power is often an illusion. We might be just a handful of voices now, but every movement starts small. If we all stand up and rally behind a common cause, they'll have to pay attention. His words hung in the air, crackling with an energy he had never felt before. Mira's nod punctuated the moment, her eyes shimmering with a spark Arthur had witnessed before, in fleeting moments over coffee. "What do you need us to do?" she asked, her voice determined, a stark contrast to the weariness he had noted earlier. Arthur took a breath, feeling the tide shift within him. This was more than just a plea. It was a plan taking shape. We need to gather as many employees as we can, not just from our department, but across the company. I'll draft an email that invites people to share their stories about what's happening. Even the smallest acts can have great repercussions. Ben raised an eyebrow.
Skepticism still hovering. And you really think that'll make a difference? They don't listen to us. They never have. It doesn't matter if they listen or not. What matters is that we ask. We deserve the opportunity to voice our concerns. Remember, the layoffs are more than just job cuts. They're lives being disrupted. We can make them see the human cost. Arthur's convictions violated the silence like a fire igniting brushwood. Leela and Ben exchanged glances, the weight of Arthur's words slowly seeping into their minds. "All right," Leela finally said. "I'm in. I want to do this." With that resolve bolstering the air, Arthur felt an unseen anchor fastening him. He quickly jotted down notes and outlined the email, crafting a message that emphasized camaraderie and courage while remaining professional. As he worked, a distinct awareness of hidden capabilities began to take hold. It wasn't just about the message, but how they would present their shared concerns, their collective story. But shadows loomed over his confidence. The question gnawed at his consciousness. Would this coalition be strong enough to withstand the scrutiny and potential backlash? Each ally in this venture brought a unique viewpoint, but would their unity crack under pressure? As the group discussed potential strategies, Arthur's mind flickered back to his encounter with Charles. He hadn't just been another janitor. He was an intricate part of a larger picture, one that had gone unnoticed for far too long. "Let's meet again tomorrow after hours to review everything," Arthur proposed, trying to sound more confident than he felt. "The next steps are critical, and I want to ensure we're all prepared to face whatever comes next." The group nodded, a collective acknowledgement that they were stepping into uncharted waters. For Arthur, each small victory amplified his unease, but he refused to let it overshadow the determination that flickered within him. As they dispersed, he stood for a moment alone by the coffee machine. He felt like a moth being drawn relentlessly toward a flame. With courage swelling in his chest, he understood that the time for action was upon them. But as he gathered his belongings and prepared to leave, the gnawing thought persisted. What if? What if they weren't ready for the confrontation that awaited them? Tomorrow, they would come together with their stories. Tomorrow, they would face the simmering storm. Would he find the fortitude to remain steady as the waves crashed around them? Arthur arrived at the office the next day, his heartbeat a steady thrum of anticipation and anxiety. The air felt electric, charged with the unspoken tensions swirling throughout the corridors. He entered the break room, glancing around as if searching for the resolve that had inspired him just the day before. Mira, Ben, and Leela had not yet arrived, and he took a moment to breathe deeply, allowing the aroma of freshly brewed coffee to settle his nerves. As he sat at the table, he confronted his inner voice, questioning whether this clarity he felt was genuine conviction or mere bravado. As each minute crawled by, doubt seeped in like tendrils of fog, clouding the intentions that had burned bright. He replayed Lila's hesitance and Ben's skepticism, wondering if they had the strength to follow through. The stakes felt higher than ever, and it tapped into a vulnerability he thought he had overcome. When his colleagues finally entered, the mood shifted. They exchanged hesitant glances that spoke volumes. The dread mirrored in their expressions revealed the weight of the task ahead. Arthur recognized the urgency pulsing within him again as he rose from his seat. "Okay, everyone, we need to go over what we'll say during the meeting," he encouraged, attempting to galvanize the group. "Right, so how do we start?" Mira asked, her voice quaking slightly, revealing the uncertainty beneath her composed exterior. "The email I drafted outlines the core points," Arthur began, referring to the printed sheets spread across the table.
We each need to identify a personal story to share. Transparency comes when people connect with the human experience behind the decisions made in the boardroom. It was a crucial moment, and he sensed their collective apprehension deepening. He could feel their breath tighten as they absorbed the challenge laid before them. Mira looked at him, eyeing him for strength, yet all Arthur felt was the burden of responsibility weighing heavily on his chest. He composed himself, reminding himself that vulnerability could also be a source of strength. Arthur gestured for them to speak freely. "What are your feelings about the layoffs?" he prodded gently, emphasizing that everyone's opinions mattered. Lila shifted in her chair. "I know someone who's going through a rough time because of this. It's personal." Her voice trembled, but she didn't shy away from sharing her story. Ben spoke next, wrestling with emotions he tried hard to conceal. "I have a family to support. My dad was laid off last year, and it took months to find a new job. It's terrifying." As Arthur listened to them, the layers of their lives unfurled. These weren't just coworkers. They were individuals battling silent wars, navigating uncertainties that had long been hidden beneath the surface. The revelation of shared struggles ignited something within him, a newfound understanding of empathy. "Let us weave our stories into a larger narrative," Arthur encouraged, finding his voice steady and firm. "When we speak, it's not just for ourselves. We amplify the voices that often go unheard." He saw their expressions soften, the resolve tightening in their jawlines as they each began to commit to the vulnerability of exposure. This was their moment, not just to speak against the layoffs, but to stand up for their own humanity and aspirations. "I can handle the corner office if they try to intimidate us," Arthur said, surprising even himself with the bravado that seeped into his words. The group erupted in soft laughter, breaking the tension that had settled over them. As they prepared to leave, Arthur created a mental checklist
of the narratives they had honed together. He had discovered not only their stories, but facets of himself, the necessary blend of courage and vulnerability to move forward. Yet, as they approached the meeting where they would present their collective stories, a gripping thought emerged in Arthur's mind, a looming question about the toll this might take on each of them. Would the risks they were about to take fracture the fragile bonds they had formed? The room felt charged as they approached the conference space, and Arthur took a deep breath before stepping inside, knowing that the real test of their resolve was about to begin. Would they brave the storm of confrontation together, or would the realities of their fears splinter their newfound bond? Once inside the conference room, the atmosphere shifted palpably. It was as if their shared resolve crackled through the air, charging every breath they took. Arthur positioned himself at the front, facing the table of executives who stared back with a mixture of curiosity and expectation. He could feel the pulse of uncertainty coursing through him as he glanced at his colleagues, who stood just behind him, each one a pillar of strength and fragility all at once. Arthur cleared his throat, conscious of the weight of the moment. "Thank you all for gathering today. We understand the severity of what's happening, and it's crucial we speak transparently about how this decision impacts us, not just as employees, but as people." Each word brought a sense of clarity he hadn't felt moments ago. The nods from Mira, Leela, and Ben filled him with conviction. Still, did he have enough inner strength to carry this moment to fruition? He hovered at the precipice of self-doubt, but pressed on, ready to confront the unknown. "I believe it's important we open up about personal experiences," he began, sharing his voice with the buzzing energy in the room. "These layoffs aren't just numbers on a spreadsheet. They affect lives, families, and our shared environment here. We're committed to innovation and success, but in doing so, we can't lose sight of our humanity." He felt a shudder of fear wash over him. What if they dismiss his words? What if they didn't comprehend the depth of his concerns? Yet the faces of his colleagues behind him anchored him. Their hope ignited a fire within. He turned and gestured to Leela. Leela stepped forward, and for a beating heart's length, silence filled the room, holding promise. "I had to watch my brother lose his job during the last round of layoffs. Our family struggled.
It didn't just affect his finances, it ripped apart our sense of security. Her voice quivered but held firm, a remarkable transformation from the timid presence he had seen that morning. Every pair of eyes seemed glued to her, feeling the weight of her words. Next, Ben shared his narrative, his voice trembling initially but gaining momentum. My dad was a hard-working man, and when he lost his position, it devastated him. Finding a job was nearly impossible. I don't want anyone else to go through that pain. We can't ignore how these decisions ripple out. This was the moment Arthur had hoped for. They were no longer colleagues, but allies, their stories interlacing to form a tapestry of clarity and humanity that was impossible to overlook. He felt pride surge in him, a steady resolve melding with vulnerability into profound strength. As the executives exchanged glances, Arthur sensed the tide shifting. Concern materialized on their faces, and he yearned for this rising awareness to resonate. Yet a nagging thought clawed at him. Had they done enough to illustrate the fragility of lives impacted by corporate decisions? Was emotional resonance enough to penetrate the steely resolve of the board? Their attention turned to him again, and Arthur steeled himself. We need to build a foundation that upholds our values, even when confronting decisions that might shield the company's progress at the cost of people. He felt the conviction grow stronger with each word, almost unrecognizable. The room sparked with energy, but as each of them shared their truths, he grappled with another storm brewing inside. What if this confrontation led to backlash against them? At that moment, vulnerability seemed a double-edged sword, one that could uplift or cut deeply. Just as Arthur felt the weight of that uncertainty, the leading executive cleared his throat. "Thank you for your honesty. I'm afraid there may still be tough decisions ahead, but it is crucial we don't lose sight of our staff in the process." Had they truly made an impact? The question loomed, magnifying in the charged silence surrounding them. Arthur stood at the intersection of hope and trepidation, caught in the swell of potential change, yet deeply aware of the precariousness of the path ahead. Emerging from the room, Arthur's heart raced with victory and fear, exhilarated yet unsettled. What reaction would their honesty draw from the decision-makers? Would their vulnerability mend the fractures, or perhaps expose deeper vulnerabilities? The looming question lingered, spawning a whirlwind of thought as they left the conference room behind. The outcome remained uncertain, but one profound truth sat with him. The time had come to face the consequences of their newfound fortitude. Exiting the conference room, the doors felt heavier than they should have, as if to remind Arthur that he wasn't just leaving behind a meeting, but stepping into an uncertain future. The hum of conversation was muted, fading into a blur of voices and footsteps as he and his colleagues made their way down the corridor. Their shared vulnerability had ignited something within him, a sense of purpose mixed with trepidation. As Arthur walked, the exhilaration of the moment began to ebb, replaced by a gnawing anxiety about the consequences they had unleashed. What if they became targets of retaliation for speaking out so boldly? The fear settled in his chest like a stone. Could he bear the weight of their shared decision if it led to worse outcomes? Crowds of thoughts crowded him. The need for accountability, the moral imperative to protect their colleagues, and the risk of backlash. Mira fell in step beside him, her face a mask of determination mixed with uncertainty. "What we did back there was necessary, Arthur," she said, her voice firm but comforting. "We can't just sit quietly while they make decisions that harm us." "Necessary, yes," he replied, the words feeling inadequate. "But I can't help but wonder if we did enough, or if we simply stirred a hornet's nest." "Regardless," she said, "our voices were heard. We chose to stand up for what matters." Mira's belief was infectious, wrapping around him like an embrace. Stepping outside into the bustling streets, Arthur was reminded of the vast world beyond the confines of their office. The daylight felt brighter, illuminating the facades of the buildings that towered above them, but he couldn't shake the weight of anticipation that loomed. He had thought sharing their stories would be freeing, yet doubt crept back in, whispering that true change often met resistance. "Regardless," she said, "our voices were heard. We chose to stand up for what matters." Mira's belief was infectious, wrapping around him like an embrace. Stepping outside into the bustling streets, Arthur was reminded of the vast world beyond the confines of their office. The daylight felt brighter, illuminating the facades of the buildings that towered above them, but he couldn't shake the weight of anticipation that loomed. He had thought sharing their stories would be freeing, yet doubt crept back in, whispering that true change often met resistance. Returning to his desk, the fluorescent lights flickered ominously overhead as Arthur sat down, still buzzing from adrenaline. He pulled out his notebook, the pages filled with ideas he had drafted before the meeting. As he flipped through them, he realized that the core of his plans had always been grounded in fostering collaboration and care, but today's events had ignited something deeper within him. His thoughts drifted to their shared stories. The raw honesty had unveiled a powerful truth. Perhaps his next step wasn't just about advocating for change, but also about cultivating a culture of support amidst uncertainty. How could they reinforce each other in the face of challenges ahead? Could he initiate weekly gatherings for discussion among the staff, where they could share their thoughts and fears, creating a safe space for everyone? The idea sparked inspiration, igniting a sense of responsibility within him. He scribbled down plans, a proposal for community building sessions, where colleagues could engage and support one another emotionally and professionally. It could be a platform for more open dialogue, echoing the sentiment they had shared earlier. With each stroke of his pen, he felt not just the weight of anxiety lift, but a profound sense of empowerment. The hesitation that had cloaked him earlier began to dissipate. Instead of merely reacting to decisions made above him, he could take tangible steps to shape the culture in their office. Yet, just as he felt his confidence taking root, his computer dinged with an email ping. It was a message from the HR department, a brief line regarding a follow-up meeting scheduled with the executive team, an invitation to discuss the day's events. The implications of that message weighed heavily on his mind. Would they follow through on their words, or was this just a distraction? Drawing a deep breath, Arthur realized this juncture was not merely about survival within the constraints of corporate decisions. It
was a call to action, a reminder that he had to be the architect of his narrative, empowered by his colleagues' courage to write the next chapter in their shared story. As the day unfolded and the clock ticked closer to the meeting, Arthur prepared himself mentally. He knew that the moments that truly mattered were ahead of him, and he would have to confront the possibility that his path might lead to uncharted territories. Could he maintain his resolve when faced with the stark reality of corporate power dynamics? The answer seemed to hang in the air, tantalizing and terrifying, daring him to chase it down. Arthur's heart raced as he read the email again. A meeting with the executive team was one thing, but discussing the day's events? That phrasing chilled him to the bone. He had faced boards and panels before, but this felt different. The stakes felt higher, like the tension in a room before a storm breaks. Closing his laptop, he sought solace in the rhythm of his breath. With each inhale, he envisioned the proposals he had drafted, the ideas swirling around his mind like confetti in the air. It was a strategy to encourage connection, to foster understanding amidst uncertainty. In the typically sterile office environment, he sought to create a new reality. But how? Would they even entertain such notions after their confrontation? He glanced at the clock. Time was ticking, yet his thoughts were a tangle of ambition and fear. The memory of Mira's encouragement flickered in his mind. If he could rally the courage to voice his thoughts in that fervid conference room, he could lead in this meeting too. The executive team had a reputation. Their decisions often bore the weight of impersonal metrics rather than the human toll those decisions exacted. How could he, a mere employee, prompt them to see beyond their spreadsheets? As the minutes passed, doubts crept in.
Was he equipped for this task? Could he wield his words with the impact needed when the stakes were so high? He leaned back in his chair, staring up at the ceiling. Each tile was a reminder of every mundane day spent in the office. But something inside him shifted. The mundane was no longer enough. This was his moment to embody the change he wished to see, and he couldn't back down now. Arthur jotted down key points he wished to address: the importance of a supportive workplace, the necessity of accountability, and the tangible steps he could advocate. Underneath it all, he felt the pressure of vulnerability creeping in. How would he articulate the emotional truths he gleaned from his colleagues? How could he distill collective fear into individual action? As he prepared, he realized the need for clarity and passion. He would have to confront his own apprehensions first. Could he present himself as unyielding yet human? Could he convey genuine concern that resonated with the executives who lived in a world where profits often eclipsed empathy? With the presentation in mind, he felt another wave of determination surge. His pen, once a mere tool for drafting notes, transformed into a wand. It was time to resolve that his voice would be heard, not just for himself, but for all the unspoken stories lingering in the shadows of the workplace. As he practiced his opening lines in the reflection of his computer screen, he noticed a flicker of resolve within himself. This wasn't just about presenting an idea. It was about courageously stepping into a role he had denied himself for too long. He would summon the strength to act, even when uncertainty loomed larger than before. Each syllable would bear his commitment to his colleagues and the narrative of gratitude tied to their bravery. Suddenly, his phone buzzed, a reminder for the meeting. He paused, glancing at the screen, hesitating at the unknown awaiting him in that conference room. The heaviness of the corporate atmosphere loomed in his mind, and yet he felt a shift. Fear now raced alongside anticipation, a fusion driving him forward. As he collected his notes and rose to leave, he caught the reflection of determined eyes in the glass of his office window. Despite feeling the ground shift beneath him, he understood that it was in moments of turmoil that true growth occurred. With each step toward the meeting room, he could almost hear his colleagues whispering behind him, echoing with silent support. In that transformation from doubt to conviction, he understood one undeniable truth. The moment of confrontation was near, demanding answers from the lifeblood of their workplace. But he also sensed that in tackling the executive team, another question hovered ominously in his mind. Would he have the courage to challenge not just the leaders, but the very systems that perpetuated fear? Drawing a deep breath, he paused at the door. The time had come to face not only the executives, but the parts of himself that still feared failure. Would he emerge emboldened, or would he be silenced? Arthur stepped into the conference room, feeling the weight of expectation press against him like the heavy air of anticipation that hung in the room. The polished surface of the long table mirrored a collective facade of confidence from the executives seated in front of him. But he recognized the underlying currents. They were just as nervous about what lay ahead. The initial greetings passed, but it wasn't small talk that mattered. "Thank you for coming together today," Arthur began, his voice infused with a newfound firmness he had cultivated through his earlier experiences. "I stand before you not just as a janitor, but as a representative of everyone who works within these walls. After our previous meeting, many of us felt energized to speak candidly about the changes or the ongoing layoffs bring to our lives." Charles Whitaker, the Billionaire CEO, leaned forward, his discerning gaze sharp yet contemplative. He didn't ridicule Arthur this time. Instead, there was a curiosity that suggested he recognized the gravity of what lay ahead. "We shared our stories last time," Arthur continued, finding strength in the support of Mira, Ben, and Lila, his silent allies now rallying behind him. Stories that illustrate the human costs behind budget cuts, individual confrontations revealing collective fears. He felt his pulse quicken, the rhythm of his heart pounding in sync with the urgency in his voice.
Our workforce is not just numbers, but a community that thrives on trust and support. Treating us as mere statistics perpetuates fear and resentment. A flicker of recognition passed through the executive's expressions, signifying cracks in their hardened facades. Arthur pushed further. Transparent communication could open avenues of collaboration between leadership and staff. We want accountability, yes, but also empathy. He paused to gauge their reactions. Their gazes were riveted on him, and he pressed on with his proposed solution. I suggest regular forums where staff can express concerns directly, like a town hall meeting. A platform for dialogue that bridges the gap between management and the workers. Time to transform our corporate culture. Eliza's earlier words resonated deeply in his mind. You can be the catalyst. He felt that fiery resolve ignite again, reminding him why he stood here today. Yet even as hope began to flicker within him, Arthur couldn't escape the reality that this meeting might turn. What if the executives dismissed him again? Or worse, what if they retaliated against those who dared support him? Doubts pressed against him, but he steeled himself for the fight ahead. Charles furrowed his brow as thought flickered behind his eyes. We appreciate your input, Arthur, but implementing personal solutions takes time. Our focus is on efficiency and profitability. Arthur inhaled deeply, drawing strength from the courage that had bloomed within him. Profitability should never come at the expense of our humanity, he countered, conviction coursing through his veins. We're advocating for not just our places within the company, but for what our lives mean. In essence, what your leadership represents. Together, we can create a forward-thinking strategy that honors everyone's contributions. As the executives exchanged glances, he sensed a shift. There was none of the previous condescension. They were weighing his words. Silence hung thick in the air, and Arthur seized the moment. Instead of layoffs, let's consider innovative solutions sparked by collaboration. Let's challenge the status quo. Ben spoke up, emboldened by Arthur's words. I fully support this idea. This corporate landscape is changing, and as workers, we need to participate in that evolution, not just comply silently. After a moment of deliberation, another executive, a woman with sharp features, clasped her hands. You're right. If we want to thrive as a company, we can't overlook the human element. A balance must be struck. The conversations around the table erupted, ideas sparking into life. Arthur felt exhilarated as genuine dialogue flowed between management and staff, a dynamic shift. If we're able to foster a sense of community, we might just avoid unnecessary layoffs in the future, another executive chimed in, seeming to echo Arthur's sentiments. As they spoke, Arthur quietly reflected on his journey. From a janitor with aspirations lost in the shadows to a voice igniting change where silence reigned. Each story shared, every feedback received, coalesced into a symphony of empowerment. The meeting concluded, but something remarkable had shifted within him. They hadn't just discussed solutions, they had built an earnest connection, one that was founded on mutual respect instead of fear. Walking back to his desk, Arthur caught Mira's eye, seeing in her the same realization. They had faced a formidable wall and chipped away at it together. He felt lighter, buoyed by a sense of accomplishment. This wasn't a final destination. Rather, it was the beginning of a journey toward transformation. He had proven himself, not merely as a janitor, but as an essential contributor to the company's heart. With each exchanged smile and nod from his allies, a newfound camaraderie blossomed that transcended the confines of their hierarchy. As Arthur settled down at his desk, a surge of pride swept through him. He thought of his children and how their lives could thrive in a world where voices like his mattered. He felt empowered, his individual transformation a beacon of hope for all those who would follow in his footsteps. Now was the moment to continue inspiring others, to build on this momentum, and thrive under a renewed culture embraced by both management and staff alike.
This realization would be the thrilling point of his journey, the beginning of real change, of a community forged in resilience and true cooperation. Subscribe immediately to the channel to not miss the next exclusive emotional stories. Leave a like now to feed the algorithm. Comment your reactions and theories about the ending. Share instantly this video with at least 5 friends who need to see this conclusion. Don't wait even one more second to share. Show your support for these personal overcoming stories. This is the moment to act.